the invisible forces pulling you into chaos. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, toxic people keep showing up in your life? Like there's some invisible force pulling them toward you, even when you're doing everything right. What if I told you that the answer doesn't lie in what they're doing, but in how you're being? Let's start with a question. Why do some people seem to attract chaos while others effortlessly repel it? Is it luck? Is it personality? Or is there something deeper at play, something biological, psychological, and energetic? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood yet transformative truths about human relationships. It's not just psychology, it's neuroscience. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll see yourself and your interactions with crystal clarity. This isn't just another self-help lecture. We're going beyond surface-level advice and getting into the biology of why certain patterns repeat in your life and how you can break free from them, not through confrontation or resistance, but through alignment. Alignment with who you truly are. So buckle up, because today we're unpacking insights inspired by none other than Shi Heng Yi, a master of understanding energy, focus, and transformation. If you've ever wondered why chaos seems to follow you around or why peace feels so elusive, this is for you. Let's get started. The neuroscience of boundaries, where lasting change begins. When people think about setting boundaries with toxic individuals, they usually imagine external actions: what to say, how to respond, when to walk away. But here's the thing, lasting change doesn't begin out there in the world of words and gestures. It begins in here, with your own nervous system, your own focus, your own self-regulation. In psychology, this is referred to as an internal locus of control. It's the belief and lived reality that your outcomes aren't dictated by the chaos swirling around you, but by the stability within you. Let me explain why this matters so much. Toxic people don't just show up randomly. They're attracted to something specific, not necessarily who you are, but how you are. Your level of reactivity, your emotional openness to chaos, your availability to participate in drama. These are the things that draw them in. When you're reactive, when you're emotionally volatile, you become a magnet for their dysfunction. But here's the good news. The moment you recognize that you don't need to convince anyone to respect you, that all you need to do is stop needing their validation, you begin to reclaim your power. And let me tell you, this isn't abstract theory. This is deeply biological. When you start regulating your nervous system through practices like breathwork, cold exposure, journaling, or any consistent routine, you're literally changing the signals your body emits. You're shifting from a state of hyperarousal, fight, flight, or freeze to one of homeostasis, calm and balance. And when you operate from that place, something incredible happens. You stop being a target. Toxic individuals thrive on emotional leverage. They look for cracks in your armor, places where they can insert themselves into your life. But when you're centered, when you're not leaking energy, not over-explaining yourself, not reacting impulsively, they can't find a way in. Suddenly, instead of asking, why do toxic people keep showing up in my life? You start asking a far more powerful question. What part of me keeps resonating with that energy? Answering that question requires radical ownership of your emotional state and energetic presence. And when you take full responsibility for both, something magical happens. You no longer attract what you've outgrown. That's when the shift becomes visible, but it always starts invisibly, internally with you. Neuroplasticity and focus, rewiring your brain for peace. There's a core principle in neuroscience that often gets overlooked in the context of human relationships. Neuroplasticity follows attention. Simply put, what you focus on, you become more of. So if you spend your time and energy obsessing over toxic people, their words, their actions, their impact on you, your brain is literally reinforcing neural pathways that keep you stuck in that cycle. Over time, you become neurologically wired for hypervigilance, anxiety, and emotional reactivity. Now, before you blame yourself for this pattern, let me clarify, it's not your fault. This is just what the brain does when exposed to chaos repeatedly. But here's where the real power lies. The moment you redirect that focus inward, you begin to reclaim your brain. Attention is the most valuable resource you have. It's the one lever you can pull that has the power to rewire everything: your mood, your mindset, your behavior, and yes, even your relationships. When you start focusing on your routines, your breath, your movement, your rest, your boundaries, you're building something much deeper than self-care. You're building internal coherence. Your mind, body, and nervous system begin working in sync. That's when you become what we call self-regulating. And here's the fascinating part. When you become self-regulating, you stop being emotionally available to things that are destabilizing. Toxic people lose their grip, not because they changed, but because you're no longer giving them the one thing they need from you: emotional fuel. This aligns perfectly with behavioral psychology. We know that when someone's behavior isn't rewarded, it tends to extinguish. Whether it's manipulation, guilt-tripping, gaslighting, it all fades when you stop reacting and start redirecting. The big shift isn't about cutting people off. It's about cutting off the supply of attention that was unconsciously sustaining those dynamics. The result? You become less reactive, more intentional. The people who were once a central source of stress simply stop showing up with the same power. Why? Because your nervous system no longer meets theirs in the same chaotic frequency. You've tuned into something calmer, something higher. And that frequency, it repels what no longer serves you and attracts everything that does. Silence as a superpower, the art of not reacting. One of the most misunderstood behavioral responses, especially in the face of manipulation, provocation, or emotional conflict, is silence. Many interpret silence as avoidance, passivity, or weakness. But in reality, silence is often one of the most neurologically powerful and strategically intelligent responses available to us. Let's break this down through the lens of the nervous system. When you're triggered by someone toxic, your body defaults into a sympathetic nervous system response: fight, flight, or freeze. Your heart rate elevates, cortisol floods your bloodstream, and your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation, goes partially offline. That's why arguments escalate quickly. That's why you say things you later regret. Because in that moment, you're not speaking from clarity, you're speaking from activation. But when you choose silence, something radically different happens inside your brain. You create space. You give your prefrontal cortex time to re-engage. You exit the loop of escalation and re-enter a place of internal authority. Silence isn't shutting down, it's tuning in. It says, I'm aware of what's happening, but I'm not giving you access to my energy. Psychologically, silence is a boundary, and boundaries don't always have to be spoken. Sometimes the most powerful boundary you can set is your absence from the emotional stage someone is trying to pull you onto. Here's the kicker: silence communicates strength on a primal level. People who are grounded in their identity don't need to defend themselves constantly. They don't need to explain themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. True confidence often speaks the loudest when it says nothing at all. Silence also gives toxic individuals what they fear most: a lack of control. When you don't react, justify, or argue, you remove their ability to hook into your nervous system. You refuse to enter their drama loop. Slowly but surely, they begin to realize this person is no longer accessible in the way they used to be. So the next time you feel that rising urge to defend yourself, to prove your point, to respond to someone's toxicity, pause. Breathe. Allow silence to do what words cannot. Because that pause isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's nervous system mastery. And over time, it becomes the very thing that dissolves the toxic dynamics you once felt trapped inside. Energy alignment, attracting what you deserve. Here's one of the most profound yet overlooked truths in both psychology and neuroscience. We are always transmitting energy, even when we say nothing. This isn't esoteric, it's physiological. The way we breathe, move, carry tension, speak, and respond sends out signals to the people around us. These signals are picked up often subconsciously by others through mechanisms like mirror neurons and limbic resonance. In other words, your internal state is constantly broadcasting itself to the world, and others respond accordingly. When your energy is erratic, stressed, or anxious, you unconsciously draw in people and situations that match that frequency. This is why certain toxic individuals seem to find you over and over again. Part of your internal environment is still a match for the chaos they bring. But, and this is key, the moment you begin to align your energy with peace, self-respect, and clarity, everything shifts. From a neurological standpoint, this alignment begins with the regulation of the autonomic nervous system. Daily practices that anchor you, like deep diaphragmatic breathing, exercise, cold exposure, mindfulness, help stabilize your physiology. When your physiology stabilizes, your emotional reactivity decreases. You start choosing your responses rather than reacting impulsively. This internal steadiness changes what and who you attract. People who operate from manipulation, emotional volatility, or narcissistic patterns no longer feel at home around you. They can't find a hook to latch onto. Instead, you begin to attract relationships, opportunities, and environments that reflect your inner sense of calm and worth, not because you're seeking them, but because your baseline energy now aligns with them. We often talk about boundaries as something external, what you will or won't tolerate. But your most powerful boundary is your energy. When your energy no longer entertains chaos, chaos stops knocking. If you want to shift what you attract in your life, whether it's in relationships, career, or purpose, you don't start by changing your surroundings. You start by aligning your internal environment. Because the brain and body are constantly scanning the world, asking one question: does this match me? And when you raise your internal frequency, only things and people that match that new level can stay. The beauty of minding your own business. There's something profoundly liberating and biologically grounding about fully owning your lane. In neuroscience, we often talk about the brain's limited attentional bandwidths. What that means is you only have so much cognitive energy in a day. Every time you divert that energy toward trying to decode someone else's behavior, fix someone's problems, or manage how others perceive you, you're depleting the very resource that fuels your own growth and peace. Here's where the science and psychology align beautifully. When you mind your own business, you're not ignoring the world, you're optimizing your brain. You're creating a loop of dopaminergic reinforcement around your own behaviors, not others. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation and focus, spikes when we make progress toward goals that matter to us. So when your attention shifts from "why are they acting like this?" to "how can I show up better today?" you begin to biologically reward yourself for forward motion. Here's the best part. The more you focus on your own path, your habits, your vision, your mental state, the less appealing drama becomes. Your nervous system starts to associate peace with progress. Chaos feels like noise. Drama feels like a drain. And slowly, without even needing to set an explosive boundary or make a big statement, you become unavailable to toxicity, not because you said no, but because you're saying yes to something much more powerful. There's also a psychological phenomenon at play called selective attention. When you start paying attention to your own growth, your brain begins filtering out distractions, especially emotional ones. You don't even notice the bait people try to throw at you. You're too locked in on what actually matters. And to those who once fed off your energy, you've become boring, emotionally inaccessible, and that's a win. So the beauty of minding your own business isn't just that it helps you avoid unnecessary stress. It's that it amplifies your energy, sharpens your focus, and creates an internal environment where toxic people simply don't fit. Because the truth is, peace isn't passive, it's produced. And when you're focused on building that day by day, you naturally rise above the noise without ever needing to fight it. Protecting your peace, a biological imperative. In both neuroscience and psychology, we've come to understand that chronic stress is one of the most corrosive forces on the human body and brain. It impacts memory, mood, immune function, sleep quality, and even the speed at which we age. And what's one of the biggest contributors to chronic stress? Unhealthy relationships. This is why protecting your peace isn't just some vague self-help concept, it's a biological imperative. If your nervous system is constantly in fight or flight mode because of the people around you always anticipating the next argument, insult, or guilt trip, you're wiring your brain for reactivity, not resilience. Peace, on the other hand, isn't something that just happens. It's something you protect. And often that protection looks like not engaging, not responding, not chasing closure. It looks like choosing environments that match your values. It looks like walking away from conversations that leave your body tense and your mind spinning. Here's the crucial shift. When you begin to prioritize your peace, you stop compromising with dysfunction. You stop shrinking yourself to keep the room calm. And your brain begins to associate safety, not with approval from others, but with alignment within yourself. That's a game changer, neurologically and emotionally. You don't owe anyone access to your nervous system. And once you deeply internalize that, you begin making different choices about who you let in, how long you stay, and what you tolerate. Peace becomes the filter. If it costs your mental clarity, your physical health, or your emotional stability, the answer becomes simple: it's too expensive. Over time, the consistent choice to protect your peace rewires your system. What once triggered you no longer registers. What once pulled you in now repels you. And toxic people, they'll notice. Not because you made a scene, but because you made yourself unavailable. And that's the real power, not in how loudly you say goodbye, but in how silently you reclaim yourself. Growth happens in silence. One of the most misunderstood aspects of transformation is that it doesn't need to be broadcast. In fact, the most profound growth often happens when no one is watching. This isn't just a poetic idea, it's backed by neuroscience. When you're in a state of deep internal change, your brain enters a mode of focused rewiring. It's called neuroplasticity, and it requires both attention and repetition, but it also requires space. Mental space, emotional space, and sometimes social space. When you step back from the noise, especially from toxic or distracting relationships, you give your nervous system the stillness it needs to recalibrate. This silence isn't emptiness, it's integration. It's your mind finally having the bandwidth to reflect, reassess, and rewire. Think of it like training a muscle. Growth doesn't happen during the workout. It happens in the recovery, in the silence, in the repair. But here's the challenge. We're conditioned to seek validation. During our evolution, we wanted others to notice that we're changing, that we're growing, that we're no longer who we were. But true growth isn't about being seen, it's about seeing yourself differently. And that shift happens most powerfully when you're alone with your thoughts, your routines, and your boundaries. Silence also protects you during the most vulnerable stages of change. Because when you're upgrading your habits, your mindset, your energy, you're delicate. Exposing that too early to the wrong people can destabilize the entire process. Toxic individuals often sense when you're evolving, and they may try to pull you back into old patterns, not because they're evil, but because your growth threatens their control. So in the early stages of transformation, silence becomes your sanctuary. You're not hiding, you're incubating. You're creating a new internal architecture that doesn't require permission or applause. And eventually, the changes will speak for themselves. Your energy will shift. Your presence will feel different. The things that used to trigger you will no longer stick. And the people who once had access to the old version of you, they won't know how to reach this new version because it was built in silence and doesn't speak the same emotional language anymore. Let your results do the talking. In neuroscience, there's something known as salience, the brain's mechanism for detecting what matters most. It filters out noise and zeroes in on what's real, what's consistent, and what produces results. The same applies in life. People eventually stop listening to your words and start paying attention to your outcomes. This is why, as you grow, especially away from toxic relationships or environments, you don't need to argue, defend, or explain your evolution. You just need to embody it. Because when your actions align with your intentions and your energy matches your values, you become someone people feel the difference in, even if you never say a word. Here's how this works biologically. Every time you choose a behavior that supports your peace, your focus, or your integrity, your brain reinforces that decision with a reward signal. Over time, these small wins compound. You build self-trust. You increase baseline dopamine levels. You shift your identity not through declaration, but through repetition. That's what creates results. And results create credibility not to others first, but to yourself. This is important. Toxic people thrive in the space between your intention and your execution. If you say you're going to cut them off, but don't follow through. If you say you want peace, but keep responding to chaos, they will always exploit that inconsistency. But when your actions become precise, consistent, and quiet, you remove that access. The only thing left for them to observe is your distance, your discipline, and your results. Letting your results speak also removes you from the emotional tug-of-war. You no longer feel the need to justify your distance or over-explain your boundaries. You just live in alignment. And the right people who are secure, emotionally mature, and growth-oriented will respect that. The wrong people, they'll fall away not because you push them out, but because they can't connect with the version of you that no longer needs their chaos. So instead of posting about your peace, embody it. Instead of warning people you're changing, just change. Instead of giving energy to old dynamics, put that energy into becoming